So, all
Oh
right.
yeah,
All right.
yeah, that's
So
fair.
where we left off was, yeah, like Chris said, we're right. It was on lease backs. So talking about everything lease backs and what all that encompasses. And before that, we were talking about warranties and we were doing public math. I remember Joe mentioned something about that. He's like, "You're gonna make us do public math." I'm like, "Yes, I'm sorry. That would be frightening for me." Um, so anyways, so before we get started, does anybody have any questions related to offers or from the past training that I could answer that maybe was lingering that, you need answered still?
So something I wouldn't mind touching on while we're going through today, talking offers, is the Express Offers program that EXP has. Um, Only because I feel like that's something that some of us may be able to leverage in our businesses.
Okay.
I don't know if anybody on
Yeah.
the team has
This,
experience with it, but if not, no
yeah.
big deal. I mean, I
No, no, I do, but um I'm thinking maybe that doesn't really apply to what I'm training on because that's like a whole different program. But I'm
different
happy
program, but
to,
still writing offers though, right? Because it's still like we still have to go into, if it's accepted, we still have to go into Sky Slope, do the, do
you
all the
do,
offer paperwork.
you do, but it's a whole different animal, sort of. So,
Okay, no problem.
but I
We
would
can
be
save it for later.
happy, yeah, I would be happy to do it and talk to you about that, maybe even one-on-one, or on
Okay.
meeting. But yeah, because it is a great tool. I've used it multiple times, so yeah, it is great. But yeah, go ahead. Were you gonna say something else? Oh, okay.
No,
I thought.
that was all I had.
Oh, okay. All right.
I do have
So,
one. Oh, sorry.
oh, go ahead.
I do have one thing that I feel like at least applies to me is just like sitting down with a client and kind of like running through what we're doing in order to get them to like understand what we're offering and why we're offering it. Um, I think that's like really where I'm at is just like if I have a client with me, can I like talk to it for them? Like, so they're like not just like this is just a number, and I don't agree with it. Like this it doesn't make sense to me, you know. I think that's kind of like where I'm at is like I want to be able to articulate that to the client, so it's not just one sided and they just have to go with what I say, kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, so you're talking about like they want to place an offer on a property. However, you're not agreeing with what they want to offer, and they're wanting to offer it anyways, and how to articulate that to them.
Exactly. Like
Okay.
maybe they don't agree that it's too like they're trying to lowball the offer, but
Mm-hmm.
they don't understand the market or they don't understand the buyers that like how many people like there's the supply is really low like in our area and there's a lot of buyers putting in offers and we need to make our offer different than everyone else's. So how can I make sure that like the buyer understands all that without making them feel like I'm trying to either not do my best effort and they're just going to go to someone else and just make sure that I'm like putting my best foot forward and they honestly believe that that's what I'm trying to do for them.
Okay, so I have several thoughts on that. So number one, I would say tell them exactly what you just told me and help them understand what other buyers are doing because that's going to be detrimental to them getting their offer accepted or not is
Mm-hmm.
them understanding what the market is like. And you know, even with everything that's going on, most people may not know how that applies to them submitting an offer, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
just saying like, hey, this is what the market looks like right now. So whenever you're, for example, I'm not saying this is a market that we're in. So like if you're in in a market or in an offer situation where you know there's going to be multiple people bidding on that home, that's what you're going to tell them. Like, I understand, you know, this is where you want to be, but let me explain to you a little bit about what kind of market that we're in. You know, we're seeing that if you place an offer, you're going to have multiple people that you're bidding up against. And so we need to come in strong. And one thing that I like that David asked the other day, and we've done this numerous times, but he just reminded me the other day that this is something perfect to do. Ask the buyer on a level of 1 to 10, how bad do you want this home? How much would it hurt if you did not get accepted on this home? And if they're like, oh, maybe a 5 or a 6, then you're like, okay. Explain to them like, hey, if we submit it, say the offer is, you know, say it's 800, and they're like, I'm coming in at 750, and you just know that's not going to get them accepted. Explaining to them like, based upon the market, based upon the comps that I pulled, because you can even pull the comps, send them the comps on that property, so the way they understand more about what's happening. Like, look, these are the homes that are selling similar, similar beds, similar baths, similar upgrades. This is what homes are selling for, so the way they can see that, and just walking them through what that would look like if they place an offer. So if they're like, it's okay if I don't get the home, I just, a 750 is the max of what I wanted to do. And you're like, I don't know that that's going to get you accepted. And they're like, no, it's okay. If I don't get accepted, I'm just going to go and look at these other homes. Then, okay, phew, I can submit it, right? But sometimes, even after all of the explaining, sometimes buyers are just going to do what buyers want to do. But if you explain, like, here's where the comps are, here's what the market is doing, now you have an educated buyer. Whether or not they listen to you is one thing. But I do like to tell my clients, like, if we come in and we place an offer at 750 and this is your absolute dream home and you don't get it, how are you going to feel? Oh, I'm going to be devastated if I don't get this. So I'm telling you, you're coming in at 750, and say they can go up. In some situations, they can't go up, right? That's their max. So then they're doing the best they can. But like saying like, hey, let's do the best we can then. If this is your dream home, I believe coming in at 750 with the activity on this home and the conversations that I have with this agent, and there's already 5 people talking about they're going to place an offer and they already have one offer in hand. Let's not leave anything on the table, and let's bring in our best offer that we can, because I don't want to see you lose out on this offer. And so, I think some agents are afraid of having that real talk with their clients. I'm always of the opinion I don't want things to blow back on me. So if they're like, I cannot, and I'm just going to play 750, and some people you just can't get it into their head, at least you told them. So that way, when they do get rejected, they're not like, well, Balker, you told me I was going to get accepted at this price and you let me think that this was a great offer. No, you're going to say, hey, you remember that conversation that we had before you submitted the offer? That came true because this is where the market is, not because I'm right, you don't want to say that, but because this is what the market is showing us. That's why you didn't get accepted. And sometimes it takes, especially first time home buyers, sometimes it takes them going through that process and getting gut punched to actually get them to come up the next time. And that's happened where they didn't listen to us and they come back and they're like, oh, dang, we didn't get accepted. And then they realize like, oh, I got to come up. And of course, that's where we go into escalation offers to try to get, like, when they don't want to, bid too high, but they also don't want to lose out. And so that's a good way to, get them to where they want to be. So, but those are some strategies that we've used to get through those situations and trying to, articulate, what the market is doing and what activity that you're seeing. Now, are there going to be times where 750 on 800 is going to get your offer accepted? Yes, but there's like, you got to know, like, okay, for each home that my buyer wanted to place an offer on, I was always the type that I'm gonna go, like, if you want to place an offer on, I'm gonna go look at comps, and then I'm gonna tell you whether or not your offer is a good one or not. I'm not the agent that, if you come to me and you're like, hey, I want to place this offer, and I'm like, okay, cool, I'll write it. It's no, I'm looking at comps and making sure, having conversations with the agent, the listing agent, where are you at? All of those things to try to come up with like the best offer possible. So, yeah, those are the things that we've been doing for years now.
Okay. So mainly comps, you would say, is like the best tool you have to like figure out and explain them what the market's
It's the
doing.
combination of everything, right? So the
Yeah.
comp, explaining the market. So if you weren't able to have that conversation whenever you were doing the buyer consult, educating them about the market whenever they are wanting to place an offer.
Mhm.
Because you don't, you want to know where your market's at.
Mhm.
And we're kind of in a really weird market right now. But
Yeah.
just knowing where the market's at and where the market is in the specific area that they're looking in, because they could be in an area where it's like super hot. Like I had buyers, they were looking at a specific neighborhood in Tampa, and like none of this high interest rate seemed to even exist, because we're still seeing, the homes there being bid way above, and basically the homes flying off the shelves there, while everybody else is struggling to sell their home. So it
Okay.
can be
Yeah.
it can be neighborhood specific too.
Yeah. I find it really odd, at least in my market right now, is like there's so many buyers and the supply is so low, but the homes are still getting like bought at high prices, but mainly you see a lot of lowballing. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, mostly people try to lowball and those are getting accepted as well. So it's very interesting, at least like from what I see on Zillow, and I try to like catch up on MLS and stuff, but they're basically like pretty linked up, like updating wise, that like there's a lot of lowballing, but some of the like $1 million sales are coming through. And I think that just like shows like residential versus some of these like high net worth individuals that like they don't care. They just don't want to buy an estate because they know the overall job market's always going to be doing well over here,
Yeah.
and trying to like figure that out on my own has been a little bit difficult because I still am like trying to ingest because I don't think I listen to a lot of educational podcasts and like books and very they apply to the general real estate market, but like finding that niche out here is a little bit different because there's a lot more investors and then there's like a big it's like a very big split between the people that can buy these $1 million ones and then
Yeah.
the people trying to get to those low ones. And
Right.
it's a huge difference. Like it's either up here or down here. It's no like,
In between. Yeah.
yeah, not at all. uh, but yeah, I understand what you're saying. I think that
Okay.
definitely helps a little bit.
Tasha, I have a question for you.
Great question.
Tasha, can you hear me?
Yeah, I didn't know if it was for me or Balker.
No, it's for you.
Okay.
I'm just curious. I know a lot of different agents, they'll send out their clients, market updates and stuff, whether it's the overall market or whether it's in a certain area that they might have been looking at. And I was wondering, like, what does yours look like? And would it even be possible for you to, like, next time you send one, could you email us like not a template, but like an example of what yours looks like?
So I don't really send out a market update. I don't have like a template or anything. It's always just been a conversation.
Okay, but if you were to send one out, or if like, does David send any out? Or at least you would know how it would kind of look like, right? Or where you would get the information from.
So a lot of it you can get from your MLS. So your MLS will provide like market stats and like info sparks and stuff like that will give you a lot of info.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say Altos Research is one of the ones that I've used. It's free, and it
Say
shows.
again, what is it called?
It's called Altos. I think it's either ALTOS Research, and just like how Tasha said, InfoSpark. Usually, it's like connected to your MLS. I've seen both of those. They send me like periodic updates of my real estate market. And you can just kind of take those infographics and just like copy and paste them over and just like kind of like
Okay.
crop it a little bit.
Yeah, especially if you have a specific client that's looking for that sort of data, you can share all of that.
Got you. Okay, makes sense.
But they have to like be the type that likes numbers and stuff, because otherwise it's just gonna go over their head.
That Altos research, Tasha, do you know if that's on Stellar? You're on
That was
Stellar,
actually
right?
what I was logging into now to see if that was the one.
Okay.
Because I know it's part of CRMLS, but I don't know about Stellar. Let me check.
Oh, you're on multiple MLSs?
Yeah, I'm on like 3.
Whoa.
Crazy. Gotta love paying my MLS dues. It's like every time I turn around, something else is done. Go ahead,
Huh.
Walter, you have to raise your hand.
Also, by the way, if you need more help with market research, I generally use like YouTube University, and there's like just like YouTube in general. And Brandon, I think his last name, but I think it's like Murden. He does videos on market research and how to find it in your area. And there was this one video he talked about like just making a general kind of video with, say, like this is the video, and then like in the background you can just kind of put like the research or the market in the back, and then you just kind of like go like point by point describing each one and be like, this is what's happening in the market. And that could be like a good thing you could just post on your Instagram, because I've noticed, at least in like all the people that I've talked to that do marketing for a lot of big realtors, they say like infographics on its own don't do very well, but like if you put it in the background while you kind of talk to it, those do very well, because they like seeing someone describe it, what's going on there.
Yeah, you could do that and then send it out to your clients.
Yeah.
I've seen plenty of people do that.
Okay, sweet.
Smart Charts is Stellar. Chris.
Smart charts in Stellar?
Yeah, Smart Charts. That
Okay.
looks like that. Yeah.
I would look right now, but my Wi-Fi isn't working right now. That's why I'm on my phone. So once it kicks back on, I'll take a look.
Okay. Yeah, so if you just go to products and services, it has that listed in there
Okay, got you. Sweet.
for market statistics.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
When we, I don't know when we can do this, but do we ever do any CMA like kind of stuff? Because I'm on the fast cap program, and one of our things that we have to do like daily is like do a CMA for a house. But I've never done one, so I was like, is there any moment that we can probably do like a CMA together, or like as a group, whatever? It doesn't really matter.
Yeah, should be able to look at our the YouTube channel that we have for that, where we upload our team meetings. You can always ask Cecilia and she can go search for it for you. But David did a CMA, and I think he did, can't remember if he did one recently, like within the past year. But I know he's at least done one within the past 2 years, and he walks you through how he does his CMAs.
Okay,
But yeah, we
Alright.
have a video on that.
thank you.
I mean, we could always do it in the future as well.
Mhm.
So. Okay, so wanted to kind of get back into terms and such in offers and knowing what to look at in there. So I'm kind of gonna delve into that real quick, unless anybody has any other questions, or you could also save it till the end. I'll open it back up again. And then if anybody has anything to interject as we're doing this, that's relevant to what we're doing, then you can just unmute yourself or raise your hand. But I kind of want it to be more interactive, right? So I don't want to just be talking the entire time. So if you guys have something that you want to say, just interrupt me. So we talked about some of the terms, mostly the financial section last time. So want to pick back up on escrow/title and who pays for that and how to mark that down. Now each state is going to be different. Like Florida, it's we focus on title, not escrow, call it that. And so it looks a little bit different in the offer, but regardless of what state you're in, it's going to say like who pays for what. And just knowing like what your state usually does. So if you're in California, escrow fees to be paid 50/50, each pays their own. Title, seller pays for that, besides like your with the lender, the buyer pays for that. But so you're going to mark on the offer who pays for what, and usually you have to identify what company it is. Now it's just going to depend on your market who pays for that and what you need to put down there. So in California, it's always seller's choice. You put seller's choice down unless your buyer has a specific one. Usually your buyer doesn't have a specific one unless you're working with an investor. Usually investors know the specific ones that they want to use. And so just know what your market usually entails for that, because you're going to have to identify that some way or another on your offer form. And then walking through what the normal inspection periods are with your buyer and knowing whether or not you should tailor those down. Like California, it's 17 days. Florida, I believe, is 15 days. And typically you want to tailor those down at least a little bit to make the offer stronger. Now, of course, you can leave it where it is if your buyer is good with that. Or if you think it's going to be a little bit longer inspection period. But for the most part, even in a slower market like now, people are still tailoring them down. Like I'm still getting countered 7 days for inspection periods in California. And I'm like, oh, I didn't realize that we were still at 7 days for inspection, even in a market that's slower. So it just depends on where the market is and what all that you're doing in that market. So, and the inspection period is going to be the buyer gets their general home inspection. So somebody comes out, like, here are the things that's wrong, toilet's leaking, roof needs some repair, yada, 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 right? But then you're gonna, if your buyer wants, and you have to educate them on this, they may want to bring out, if the toilet is leaking, or if the roof has damage, then maybe they want to bring out a plumber, or maybe they want to bring out a roofer. So it's really going to be determined based upon that general home inspection. And sometimes the timelines are so tight that it's like, well, how do I get all of these people out? And of course, all of those are on like time frame schedules, right? It'll be there anywhere from 9 to 12, and then they show up at 1, right? So it's kind of difficult whenever you're going through those sort of things. That's why a lot of times I don't necessarily coach them and say like don't get those things done, because I'm like, it's up to you, but you can always just go in and ask for credit for those sort of things or have the seller repair it, because it's a lot. And especially if you're an agent dealing with a vacant home, you don't have all day just to sit at a house waiting for an inspector. What if you have showings? What if you have all of these other things, right? So sometimes it is better to just like, hey, let's ask for credit. Now, could there be, even more damage after that? I could do a whole like thing just on inspections themselves. I could do a whole training on just that. But so, but this is the time where they're going through, they want any specialized inspections, because when the general home inspector comes through, he's not a licensed plumber, not a licensed roofer, not a licensed anything. He's just licensed to go out there and do a general home inspection. And then of course they're looking at the neighborhood. Is the neighborhood good? Or they could drive by the neighborhood at night, make sure that they're good with it. They're looking at schools, they're looking at zoning, they're looking at, doing property surveys. They're looking at every aspect of the home. So making sure that you're good, the buyer is good with that time period to put into the offer. So you may need to tailor that down. So And then we have inspections versus appraisals. There's a confusing terminology that buyers use and agents use, and it's in property inspection. So a lot of times the buyers get that confused because they're like, wait, is an inspection going to happen on my home? I'm like, so let's just take a couple steps back. Property inspection and an appraisal are two different things. And so a lot of times they call it a property inspection, even though it's technically an appraisal. So to avoid confusion on those things, let's call it an appraisal versus a property inspection. And a property inspection should never be sent to a lender. However, an appraisal is sent to the lender because it has to do with, making sure that the home is worth what you're offering on it. So the way that if your buyer were to default, they could get their money back. So there's completely two different things. Could repairs come up on appraisals? They absolutely could. Termites, water heater bracing, those sort of things would be sort of things that would come up on an appraisal. Now, those sort of things will also come up on an inspection, but those two things should not be confused. We even have forms in California to say a property inspection is not an appraisal because this has been confused so much. So if you want to, you could use form, that form that says that. But it's important to let your clients know what the difference is between those things because it is a very common misused term with calling it a property inspection because then your buyer's like, wait, doesn't the lender do the property inspection? And so it's just, I can't tell you how many conversations I've had of like what the difference between a property inspection and appraisal is. So just make sure you're explaining that to your client as you're going through, the offer terms. Any questions so far?
No, ma'am.
Okay. All right, and then going to closing periods. Actually, let me go back to inspections and appraisals. So if you guys have anybody that is placing an offer for VA or FHA, you usually will have some sort of form. In California, it's a VA, FHA, a mandatory clause. That always needs to be included with the offer. And then for other states, there's also a similar type form that is talking about it being a VA offer or it being an FHA offer. So just be aware of those forms because like in California, buyers offering 800, that amount needs to go on that FHA, VA, mandatory clause. So just make sure that for your state, what what the form is to use. Usually it will probably tell you on your offer. And make sure you have those appropriate forms whenever you're filling out everything. In Florida, there's also a VA form as well that needs to be used. Don't ask me the name of it. Don't know the name of that one off the top of my head, but just make sure that you know what form needs to be used, and I can also help you with what you need to fill out on that form. Hold on a second. So, okay, so there's that, and then closing periods. Typical is a 30-day. If sometimes there's particular situations, and so you can put, closing before, 30 days or something like that. So it really just depends on what the situation is, but just know that the normal closing period is 30 days. Expiration of the contract. This is going to vary state to state, but usually it's a 3-day window. Just letting your buyer know that they can shorten that if they want to. So, for example, if it's a Thursday when you're submitting the offer and they have open houses coming up on the weekend, you can always have it set to expire before the open houses happen. So that way they can't shop your buyer's offer. So you could, tighten that up if you need to. So that's just up to what your buyer wants to do. But just determining what that expiration is with your buyer, because that's something that I usually honestly forget when I'm going through and talking to my clients. But if you ever forget, you can always just text them like, hey, usually this expires in 3 days. Do you want me to put it that it expires tomorrow at 6 p.m. and they usually will tell you like, oh yeah, let's do that. And so you want to make sure too that you're following up so that way if it does expire before then, you're jumping on the agent and like, hey, let's like, are we going to get a response before it expires? Some states are more sticklers about this than others. Like Florida's more of a stickler about it. But California, sometimes the agent will let the offer expire and then still send you a counter offer. So those situations can happen. And I always hate that because I'm so, trained on how the contract works that I'm like, okay, like if it expires about that time, can we at least get a counter offer, before that offer expires? And then included versus excluded items. So what that means is there's certain items that are included with the home sale and certain items that are not included with the home sale. Again, gonna vary per state, but like appliances. So don't assume that all appliances are gonna stay. Refrigerator, stove, washer, dryer, those all aren't expected to stay, right? So you typically have to check a box or have to include some of those things depending on the state. But don't have your buyer expect that, that TV is going to stay, right? Because technically the TV doesn't stay. Don't expect that, that Ring doorbell is going to stay. Because if they don't ask for it, sometimes that wouldn't be included. So the best thing you can do is go and read the contract where it says what items are typically included. So curtain rods, drapery, those in California are expected to stay. Well, in Florida, I don't believe that's the case. I'll have to go back and read it like I'm telling you guys to do. But just check on that and you can honestly have your clients read that too. Like, well, what do you want to ask for? And they're like, well, I don't know. They're like, okay, if you go and read this part of the offer that I'm, typing up for you, out of those items and everything that you saw on the property, what would you like to ask for? Because don't assume that because it's in the MLS that stays, because if it's not in the offer, it doesn't exist. Because I've had times where either as a listing agent or the buyer's agent, items were like, oh, I thought that was going to stay. And it's like, well, you didn't write it into your offer. So how do you expect for that to stay? So if even in the MLS, if it says refrigerator, washer, dryer included, what are we going to include in the offer? Refrigerator, washer, dryer. We're not going to just assume they're going to leave that based upon good faith. So if your buyer wants to ask for certain things, make sure they understand too. Like one of the prime examples that I got told was there was a situation where the buyer was upset because the kitchen island got taken because it was on wheels. So you could just roll it away. So buyers, it wasn't my clients, but I always remember that because I was just like, oh yeah, we should probably make sure that those things like are, is that going to stay above a toilet that's not attached to the wall? These sort of things buyers get attached to when they walk in for their final walkthrough or they walk through their house whenever they own it. They're like, wait, what happened to the cabinets above the toilet? Well, that was just a removable shelf that wasn't attached to the wall. So these sort of things, make sure that you're thinking of those things to explain to your buyers and including those if they want to ask for anything.
So you're saying even if it's in the MLS that the washer, dryer, island, or whatever it may be, is like going to be taken over by the buyer, like they're offering it, the buyer in their offer still has to say that they're going to be getting that piece of property, unless it's a fixture, of course, right? It's all real property.
Unless it's fixed to the floor.
Okay.
But if it's a
right.
rollaway or something like that, your buyer may assume that it stays, but it does not. So like there has been a situation with the cabinet above the toilet, and so whenever I went back through and was looking at the pictures, I made sure to let my client know, like, hey, this doesn't stay. Are you good with that? And so just making sure that they know like, hey, these things stay, these things don't. And so, yeah, but like light fixtures, those always have to stay because they're attached to the property.
Like a ceiling fan?
Like a ceiling fan, yeah. Unless the ceiling
Okay.
fan is taken down and is laying on the floor, like it's considered part of the
Oh,
property.
okay. Okay. What if the sellers are offering the washer dryer and then the buyers don't put washer dryer in their offer? The sellers can just legally just run away with the washer dryer even though they said, here,
Yep.
take it. Okay.
Yep.
And that's the buyer's problem
Yeah,
at that point.
it is the buyer's and your problem. You may have to end up paying for a washer and dryer. Because if you let your client
Okay.
assume that that washer and dryer was a part of the offer and you forgot to include it, you're gonna have to be on the hook for a new washer and dryer.
Okay, that makes sense.
Because that's what I would do. If I mistakenly did that, I would be like, oh shoot, I gotta provide these people a washer and dryer now because I let them think it was part of the offer, and then lo and behold, it's gone at the end. Like that's what I would do as an agent, is just buy it for them.
Okay, what if the seller's offering the washer dryer and the buyer says, I want the washer dryer, in their offer says, we want the washer dryer and the toilet that's not attached to the wall, but the seller doesn't want to give the toilet away. What do they do at that point?
Well, they would have to replace it with another toilet. So if it's a fixture to the property, they're gonna have to replace it
Yeah.
with a like item. So like, for example, this is actually one of my first 3 transactions this happened. So it was an out of state client. So I'm doing it was a military client. So I'm doing the final walkthrough for them on my own, which EXP were not allowed to do. But I wasn't with the EXP then. And I'm going to do the final walkthrough on my own just to check and make sure everything looks good, because that's part of it, is you're going through and making sure everything's there, everything looks similar to what the buyers, purchased the property as, and making sure all repairs are done. So I'm walking through, and the light fixtures were missing, like a couple of light fixtures were missing off of the wall, and mirrors were missing off of the wall. And so I was just like, wait a second, this isn't right. I called up the listing agent. I was like, hey, these things are missing and this should not be missing. They need to be replaced. Well, I think we scared them so much because we're like, it's a breach of contract. You should not be taking, light fixtures and mirrors off of the wall that belong to the property, so much that they replaced it and they gave my buyer a credit because they did something that they weren't supposed to do. So what you should do, if you're a listing agent, you should explain to them like, hey, if this light fixture is something that, is passed down from generation to generation, you don't want to include it, take it off, box it away and replace it with the one that the buyer can get. So that way you don't get yourself into those sort of situations. So like if they do want the toilet, like say it has some fancy bidet or something, and this has actually been a part of offers before. It was like, if you ask for if you ask for this, piece, of furniture or whatever, the sale is done. So that can happen. But like say it does have some fancy bidet or something, just, they have to replace it with something else, something similar.
Okay, that makes sense.
Because
But
they can't just take things, right? So
right,
that has to be agreed upon
right.
prior, so it's something that they can't just do and be like, oh, I'll just replace it. It's like, no, you have to, the buyer and seller have to agree on that. You know what I mean? But if they're like up front, like toilet is excluded, that would be something where it's like, okay, well, what are you going to put in place of it? Because it's not like you just move into a house without a toilet. So
Right. It basically just comes down to get everything in writing to cover
yeah.
both sides. And then so as far as like contract wise though, if the buyer offers, sends up an offer for the washer dryer that were included and the toilet that wasn't included but they want it, and the seller wants to take the toilet that's not attached to the wall, what would the seller or the seller's agent do at that point? Do they do counter offer, or what do they do at that point? Contract
Yeah,
wise.
typically that's what you see, right? So say your buyer, submits that offer, the seller, or, the seller can counter that out. So like, okay, we accept that you want the washer and dryer, but the toilet, we're gonna keep the toilet and then we're gonna
Mhm.
just replace it with this one. So then it's up to the buyer, like, do you want to accept that or you don't? Or if you're like, well, that's too wishy-washy, let's say it's this toilet by American standard and it's this sort of toilet with a soft close lid and all of that. Your buyer can do that. So the way it's not too vague.
Okay, got you. And that is the, just some specific on the contract. That would be the counter offer, right?
Right.
Like
Or
the
if you want
form
to be a
itself.
really good, a good agent, you would go into the MLS and see what items are excluded. Because sometimes those are listed out too, like excluded, exclude light fixture or something like that. And then you go through and you're like, okay, they don't want to include these items, so I'm gonna go ahead and exclude those. Of course, you're having that conversation with your buyer as well. Like, hey, they do not want to offer these items. Of course, there could be some situations where the buyer is like, no, I want to ask for that anyways. But if your buyer is submitting a good enough offer, like anything's for sale, right? So they could, decide, that they want to accept the offer, even though they initially said that it was excluded.
Right. Okay, makes sense.
Yeah, because like the MLS is just kind of look at it as like a guide, right? Like, okay, they want these things excluded, these things they're willing to include. And it's up to your buyer what they want to do. Like I've had times where they're like, I really don't want that washer and dryer. It's horrible. I'm just gonna buy my own. So, you're just basing it based upon what they're saying in the MLS and what your buyer wants to do. And so every time I write an offer, I'm pulling up the MLS. I'm looking at everything on the MLS, like, what's included, what's excluded. Do they want, do they need to sell their property before, my buyer can buy this one? Because that's going to factor into things. What does it say in the private remarks that only agents can see? So the way I can, because sometimes there's extra info in there that you'll want to tell your buyer. Like sometimes there's like a death on the property in the past 3 years, and you want to tell your buyer, like, hey, the seller died of natural, or the previous owner died of natural causes or something like that. Whatever's in the MLS, like you're looking at all of that data in there in order to write the best offer to get accepted. And because there's nothing better than a clean offer whenever agents are submitting offers as a listing agent. What you want to see is a clean offer that you don't have to go and counter back out everything or put things back in that should be in there. So, but yeah, everything's like a negotiating point, right? So if there's certain things that they don't want to include, if your buyer really wants to include it, they can ask for it. Doesn't mean that they're definitely going to get it, but just everything's negotiable. I think the stickiest part is when people ask for furniture. That's the hardest part because the lender does not like to see that. The lender doesn't like to see furniture as a part of the sale.
Why is that?
Just because it's not real property and they just never like to see that. So then we usually do a separate addendum or something, or a separate agreement on the side or something that they don't see. Because they don't like to see that, because that they just can't do anything with that. They don't like to see that.
It's pretty common for homes to be fully furnished, if not some furniture, right? When they're selling it.
Sometimes, like, they don't care about, like, okay, washer, dryer, stuff like that. But it's like if you're asking for like the whole house of furniture, they don't want to know that.
Because I did an open house probably a month ago, and the owner was like, the seller was like, we will pretty much do it fully furnished, you know.
Mhm.
But the lender doesn't want to see that.
Typically, the lender doesn't want to see anything about furniture because they can't place a value on it. Because it's not like a financed item. So they can't really place a value on the furniture.
I
Makes
get what you're
sense.
saying. Okay, that makes sense.
So
So what would you do then you know, a seller was selling their home fully furnished, do you just kind of keep that part out so the
Yeah, it's
lender
a
doesn't see that part?
separate deal on the side, yeah.
The
We're
separate
not really
addendum you were
involved,
talking about?
it's just we help facilitate that for our clients.
Okay,
Yeah, we're not touching money or anything like that, but
okay,
like, oh, if I Venmo you $10,000, I'll keep the furniture, but it's not something that we really participate in real estate wise. Because I've had instances where the buyer bought furniture off of the seller, but I didn't have anything to do with it. So, but it can happen. But so yeah, like I said, I always pull up the MLS, see what everything look or see what is pulled up in there, standard sale, REO, probate. Like I already said, read the agent remarks, what's the seller needing, what do they want submitted with the offer, where to send the offers to, make sure not to ignore that info. There's all kinds of good info in those private remarks that only agents can see. So make sure you're reading that, knowing what to do. And then also making sure that if the property has solar panels, making sure that you know whether they're leased or owned, because then your buyer's gonna have to assume that solar panel lease or lien, and sometimes it can cause escrow delays. Like we're delayed like a couple weeks before due to the solar panels needing to be transferred over to the other owner, and they don't always care that they don't usually care that you're under escrow and you know you need to close on time. They don't care, they could care less. So knowing that for your buyer too, like, hey, if we get into this, we're likely not going to be able to close on time because it has to do with the solar panel company. Now, if they're owned, there is no issue. It's only when they're leased or liened, and usually like Sun Power and those sort of companies are. So, but knowing that up front will help set the precedent for that. Because then at least your buyer knows, like, they don't care if it takes forever to transfer from the current owner to them. So it's kind of a pain too when you're going through transactions like that where there's a solar panel lien. It's the worst thing to go through whenever you're in an escrow. And so that's why a lot of these a lot of new home sales in California, every new home sale in California has to have solar panels on it now. I'm like, great, that's not good for agents, because then, or you know, agents and owners, because then it makes it so much of a pain whenever you're having to sell your property.
Hey, Tasha, can you explain a little bit more why that is? Because you're right. I mean, solar panels are all over the place out here, and I'm getting used to seeing this on like seller listings that it says, you know, a solar contract is required as part of the deal. So I kind of look at it kind of like you mentioned the furniture piece. Hey, you can do this deal, but your solar contract is going to have to be taken offline. Like I'm the agent here. I'm not handling solar. That's between you and the seller. I don't know. Is that not the way to handle that?
No, we do, because it's like under lease and liened items, right? So luckily the buyer does have that period where they can they're looking through that contract, right? And so they should, at the beginning of escrow, you should probably ask them like, hey, when do you think you'll get me the, solar panel documents? Because that is a big part of escrow, and that is what we do manage. We have had to even call the solar panel company to try to get them to finally transfer it over to the buyer, because the escrow can't close until it's transferred. So, and the solar panel companies just have zero cares in the world for who owns this in a sale. They literally don't care, because it doesn't have anything to do with them, even though it does. We're like, well, you're holding up the closing of this property because you don't want to transfer it in time. So they could take 45 days to transfer it. We have no control over that. But we've had to call them ourselves and be like, hey, I'm just trying to facilitate you, transferring it over to the buyer, even though the seller has done everything that they could. So I don't know why they don't, like, I know why they don't care, because they're like, somebody's got to pay me and I have a contract with this person. They just make it incredibly difficult on the buyer whenever the buyer is trying to get it transferred into their name. So I would just monitor that if you ever have one. And you probably will, being in California. So we get all the fun there. We get all the fun things.
Yeah, over in New York, we also have like a program running by the state that like offers free solar, which is it's just a lease solar program that they run, which they're saying that like since like the bills are gonna go up for normal power, you're better off doing solar, but then you're obviously gonna be leasing for the rest of your time while you have the home, so it's that part too.
Yeah. Yeah, it can be a pain, and we've been through a couple escrows where we're like, great, it's a leaned or leased solar panels company, so really great. This isn't gonna be great at all. We're not gonna close on time. So. But we can only do so much as agents. We're like just facilitating, right? And that's mainly what we are. When we're going through these transactions, we're just a facilitator, right? Because we can't actually do anything, right? We can send over documents. We can't control what the buyer wants to do, what the seller wants to do. Can't really control solar panel company. You can't control the lender. You're making sure things are going on time, but you're not the one actually controlling the outcome, right? And the actions, because the buyer makes the decision, the seller makes the decision. Agents are just facilitators, and I think that this gets lost a lot whenever you're going through a transaction, especially if the transaction starts out with the agent telling you that they've been doing this for 30 years. That's whenever you know that it's not going to go so well, because agents want to decide things for their clients. And so I've had plenty of agents that are calling me like, hey, will your buyer accept 8:30? I'm like, I don't know why you think I'm accepting an 8:30 offer for my client. I'm going to go back and I'm going to talk to them and see if 8:30 is going to work for them. But I can't tell you how many agents I've talked to that make these decisions for their clients. Everything is your client's decision. Now, what they want to decide is on them, and we can tell them the consequences of, if you don't do this, then this could happen. And so we're telling them the consequences. But what's great is that we don't have to make any of the decisions. That's all on our clients. We're just telling them what the outcome could be. So we're just facilitators, and we're just explaining how the process works and what they can or cannot do. And even that's limited, right? Because we're not attorneys. So we can't, necessarily tell them everything that they can or cannot do. But like, just giving them options as far as, what they can do and what offer they could accept and what the norm is, and, whether they should go up or down in price, or if they should stick to their guns, or yada, yada. And sometimes you just have to roll the dice and see what happens. And, your buyer has to be on board with that. We've always been agents that we go by the contract, right? We don't go by what we want to do or what our seller wants to do or what our buyer wants to do. We're going by what the contract says that we can do. Now, am I firm and like, oh, nothing will ever change? Like, no, but both parties have to agree. That has to be in writing. If it's not in writing, it doesn't exist. So if anybody tries to like work out a deal with you and like, oh, this is what it's going to be, oh yeah, that shed will be left, and then they don't leave it, their word means nothing, because if it's not there and it's not in the contract, you have no leg to stand on. So agents will try to get you to do certain things in the contract that are not actually in there. And so your superpower is going to be, you know, the contract because you read it and you know what to do and they don't. Even if they've been in for 10 years, agents still don't know the contract, guys. They've been doing real estate for 10, 15, 20 years. They still don't know the contract. And some of them think that they do. But the thing is that like people try to make up their own timelines too. Like, oh, okay, you know, EMD is going to be accepted, you know, on Monday. Well, we need you to have it tomorrow by 5 p.m. You're like, wait a second. Per the contract, my buyer has 3 business days, but you didn't get us the wire instructions until Tuesday at 10 p.m. How is my buyer supposed to wire you something then, right? So just knowing what those terms are, and what the contract spells out is going to be everything for you, with figuring out what you can or cannot do. I've had agents try to completely cross out language that's not able to be crossed out in contracts. And had I known better, I would have, you know, slapped his hand and been like, hey, like this is the wrong way to do things. Now, are there certain areas where we can like write in different terms, like in an escalation clause, stuff like that? Yes, but we all have to be very careful when it comes to writing offers as agents, because we're signing up our clients to things and we're changing things for them in their future and their home. So we need to be very careful as to what additional terms that we put, the language that we put into offers that aren't necessarily, you know, a part of the offer, if that makes sense. Like if we're writing in additional, like, hey, this will be installed in the home, and we don't identify where this is going to be installed in the home and what brand it is and what type it is and what model it is. Like we have to get real specific, because I have missed out for my clients on things. And so I've made mistakes and I will continue to make mistakes because I'm human. But, you know, we can do better as agents, right? And the way we do better is that we read the contract and we know the contract. And, you know, that can be, you know, your superpower, so that way you don't get pushed over by some experienced agent because you know your contract as a new agent. Like that's going to give you like the best superpower in this business. It's just knowing what it says. So, because that's how I felt. I'm like, well, I know I'm new, but I'm going to read this contract and I'm going to read it until I understand what the heck it means. And I was super diligent about that whenever I first started out, because I was like, I know I can help people. I just need to know, you know, need to understand what the contract actually means. And I'm like super passionate about it. But any other questions, thoughts, inputs?
No, ma'am.
Go ahead, Balker.
Yeah, sorry. For contracts, is there anything for a training for a contract, or is that something you guys already have videos on?
Is there anything what? I'm sorry.
Or are we gonna do like a training on contracts and like what you personally think is like an important part of it? Because I know like contracts are all different in different states.
Yeah, no, not necessarily, because this is basically how I'm teaching you guys on contracts, right? Because you guys have your state brokers, because they're gonna be the best ones to teach you guys about specifics of the contracts.
Okay.
Of course, when you're writing your first contract, we can be there to help you.
Yeah.
So that's the part that we'll help you guys with. We're gonna rely on the brokers to train you guys on contracts, but I wanted to teach you guys a little bit about why you do one thing over another and not necessarily explain one specific contract.
Okay. So, do you think we're gonna do that on some type of weekly training at some point?
No, what I'm saying is like, this is my second training. So that's basically what I'm doing, is I'm going through and explaining, like, you know, the different things about, you know, included versus excluded and what you do for solar panels and stuff like that. but I'm not gonna like go deep into like each specific contract
okay.
item, you know what I
Okay.
mean? And
I see
so,
what you're saying.
yeah, like one-on-one, whenever you have a offer that you need to submit for a client, then we
Mhm.
can, you know, we can like tell you like, hey, do this instead of this.
Okay, I see.
But that
Yeah,
was the purpose of these, you know, trainings, is to delve deeper into like, okay, do this, not that. Make sure you do that. Like the way that we've had conversations with our clients on what to do versus what not to do, and the reason why you're doing those things, because a lot of times the contracts classes don't get into those things. And so we're teaching you more as a team how we've done things. And you can take what you like and apply it to your business.
okay. Do you think we could have like some of these like kind of like, I guess, best what's the word? Best best practices? Like, do you think we could have like that like as a PDF that we could write down somewhere? So that could be kind of like a Gwilt kind of like best practices thing for contracts maybe.
Let me think about it.
Mhm.
I do know that I already have something. I might have something already related to that,
Okay.
but let me go back and check. But no, that's a good idea. Because I won't do it for each state, right? Because I can't.
No, yeah,
But I could
definitely.
do like a general idea of best practices.
Hmm.
If that
Yeah.
doesn't already exist. I don't think it already exists, but let me go back through and check. So,
All right. Thank you.
good idea. Yep, you're welcome.
Tasha, I kind of have like a similar question. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, my connection's like really poor right now. I apologize. But would it be
You're
fair to ask you, kind of going off what he was saying, right?
mhm.
So that we're optimizing our time, studying the right contracts and getting to know them like the back of our hand. Because I know there's thousands out there, especially they differentiate per state. Could you give us like a list of your top six, right? Three most important for buyer, three most important for the seller side. And then so that way we can just spend the most time when it comes to studying contracts, just reviewing those.
Hmm.
I agree.
So you're asking for, yeah.
Because like there's thousands of contracts. Depending on the house, we can go over a bunch of different contracts. And we're not gonna it doesn't make sense to read and read and read and read over thousands and thousands, whatever contracts. But we want to study the right ones, the most common ones, and know the most
So
basic and most common ones.
yeah, so for Florida, it's gonna be your as is contract.
Oh, the 13-page one. Okay.
The FAR bar as is contract. Oh, you said you are saying the 13-page one, but wait a second though, because California is like freaking 40 pages.
I was
So
gonna
we're
say,
actually spoiled in
Tasha,
Florida.
we just did contracts class this morning on EXP World out here in California, and this is 6 weeks in a row of only one contract. That's the purchase
Yeah,
agreement. And
yeah,
I mean, we're going into a seventh week next week, next Wednesday.
yeah.
So and we're like at 26 or 27 pages. I mean, it's
And they
in
just keep
depth.
adding
So
pages too.
yeah, Balkar, I bet New York has a class like this. Hopefully it's not a contract that's this long, but good luck.
I I don't doubt it. I bet it's probably just as long or even longer. Knowing New York, they love making things complicated.
And I guess it just comes down to the submitting the offer lesson in
Yeah.
the Gwilt Group University, because that'll narrow it down to what contracts we need
So
when
yeah,
submitting an offer for the buyer, and then we could just study those.
yeah, I would study the as is FAR bar, because
Yeah.
that's gonna give you like that's usually gonna be the one that you're gonna use for residential purchase. Because the other forms are gonna be applicable based upon the situation. So if it's like I was talking about before, if it's VA, you're gonna use the VA form. And so there's just gonna be specific scenarios like that. So really, as is FAR bar, California, RPA, I'm sorry, I don't know which one for you. But but there's always going to be at least one main one that you're going to use for residential. So that's why it would be hard for me to come up with a list of those, because there's not really something that I could tell you specifically for each one. Like even for California, you're using the RPA and you're using the direct compensation form to get paid. So those are going to be the two main ones that you're going to use. So your offer and your direct compensation form from EXP.
I was gonna say that if you're in the Mill EXP group, I just contacted someone, and there's like, I forget what they're called, like team leaders in every state that you can talk to about some of these contracts. Because I know I don't know if it's contracts or the VA loan. It's one of the two, but they do like trainings on like VA things, like so that you
Yeah.
can be like a subject matter expert in in VA in general. Because I think in general most people just don't know so much, and we can be that people that like can educate them and won't feel so scary, because I know a lot of people don't like working with VA loans because of that reason, you know, at least
Yeah.
in New York.
Yeah, California too. Florida's a little bit more friendlier. So, but yeah, no, that's good. I didn't know that they did that.
Yeah, I just met up with them yesterday. It was actually through the Fast Cap program, and they were trying to get us to have a running partner, which is just like an accountability person that makes sure that you do your daily practice, your daily prospecting activities. You call it like DPA or whatever. And I was able to find a running partner that was Army National Guard, and he was already in the Millnet, so, and he's in the local area, and he was talking about like he still lives on base, so he knows like um the New York, I guess, military network a lot better because he's still in. And I see that as a great way to network myself way into the New York veteran or like active duty network, because I feel like I'm totally out of that right now, because recruiters are kind of like, they're separate from like the real bases that have the active duty members in them.
Gotcha. Okay. Anything else?
Oh, ma'am.
All righty. Joe, you got anything else?
No, I was over here on my other screen trying to find, I thought it was something in Sky Slope that had like, you could do the filter like top used forms, but I can't find it. It's one of those things I know I came across out here in
Top used
California.
forms? Like for
Yeah,
you
so
or
like
for
when you
company
go,
wide?
no, well, you can, I think you can break it down by like geographical region here in California. So you know how there's like uh
Yeah, when you go to browse
EXP of
libraries. Yeah.
Los Angeles. Yeah. So when I go into the forms library, I know there's something in there where I can separate that out, and it will bring
Yeah.
up like the top forms in this area sorted. So that way I know, oh, the buyer broker agreement's the number one form, the listing agreement's number two, the RPA is number three, that kind of thing. I was just looking for it to hopefully be able to add that to the conversation, but no luck.
So you're talking about something besides the filter, right?
Yeah, I think once you're in Sky Slope, there was, go to like browse libraries or something like that. And then there's, I thought, I mean, this is, it's been 7 weeks or 8 weeks now since we even talked about that in the contracts class, but there was some question asked weeks ago in the California contracts class, very similar to what Chris was just asking about, was, what are the top forms that we should really spend some time on? And they mentioned it back then, and I was looking for my notes and also looking on Sky Slope, but no luck yet. If I find it, I'll throw it on Slack.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, please do, because I would be interested in that, because like I know they have their templates. So they'll offer you templates. If you go to the templates, your brokers already have forms there for you to use. But I think you're talking about something else, Joe. So I'm interested to know what that is too.
Yeah, I'm definitely talking something else. It's like the, like actually in the forms library, but I don't know. If I find it, I'll make it known.
Let's see, add additional association library. Oh, no, that's associations. Okay, now you got me curious. I'm gonna be searching for this until you tell me what it is.
Don't spend too much time. I mean, I literally
Yeah.
spent an hour last night trying to find some stuff for the housing element meetings out here in my city in California, and I was like, oh my gosh, I've spent an hour looking for this data. Like I can't do this. So I just finally had to shut it down and send
Yeah.
an email out to one of the guys in the board and just say, no, I'm sorry, I'm not going to find this.
Yeah, I'm not finding it either. All right. Well, you got me curious now. Anyways, anybody else have anything?
No, ma'am.
All righty, guys. Well, we won't be doing one of these until next year. So if you guys have any ideas or anything like that, please pop them on Slack. And that was a great question, Joe, that you had about express offers. Might be a good thing to bring up tomorrow at the team meeting, so that way everybody can be there. But anyways, thank you guys. Thanks for asking the good questions, and I'll see you on a team training next year.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
See ya.
See you later.
Thanks for having us.
Take care.